Hi guys! So this video is going to be an introduction to digital art. Quite a few people on my live streams and recently with the blowing up of my Draw This Again challenge have been asking me about tips about digital art, and so I thought I would do an introduction to digital art kind of video. Now I'm doing it on Paint Tool SAI 1. My usual program of choice is Paint Tool SAI 2, but I thought I would do it on the first version just to make this a simple, basic tutorial. It's all the basics that you need to know about digital art. A lot of these things can actually be applied to other programs, but some of the stuff is going to be exclusively to Paint Tool SAI. I hope you find this tutorial helpful because it's something I wish I would have had when I was younger. First of all, you will need a tablet to get the best out of your drawing software. Whatever drawing software it is that you use, a tablet is always going to be the best option. Yes, you can use a mouse, and there are ways in using a mouse with digital programs, but it's definitely best to have a tablet. With tablets, they have pressure sensitivity. I am going to do videos about drawing tablets in the future, but I thought I could start with the software because you want to get an idea of how a software works, because knowing your digital art programs before you get a tablet, it saves that bit of extra time trying to explore your tablet functions as well as a new digital art software. I'm actually going to start a new canvas. I don't really have to, but I think I'm just going to do it for the sake of the tutorial and just to make it easy by starting from the beginning. First of all, obviously you can see there's two tabs, you can switch between them, you can have multiple pieces of artwork open at the same time. It's definitely something that's really useful. Something to explore with any digital art program first is what options are at the top. You can see that there is this bar right here. File opens up new, open recent, save as, export as, and all the regular things you need to save your file. Edit is all about cut, copy, paste. You can copy and paste images in and between files, which is really handy. The Canvas tab allows you to change the resolution, change the size, and flip the canvas horizontally, vertically, 90 degrees clockwise and counterclockwise. Layer has a lot of different options regarding layers. I'm going to go into a bit more detail about what layers actually are, but it's really nice to know that there is a function for layers at the top, just in case you get confused. Selection is all to do about selecting things on the canvas. That will be a later part of this tutorial. Filter. Filter is when you have something on the canvas and you want to change the hue and saturation. So that is how bright your colours are on the canvas, whether you want to dull them down or make them a lot brighter, as well as brightness and contrast, making them pop or just dulling them down a bit. The next drop down menu is View. This one has a very important feature that I use all the time when it comes to my live streams, my videos. It's so handy. The window drop down menu allows you to change the look of the interface and how it works. The most useful thing in others is actually the keyboard shortcuts menu. This is where you can change all of the keyboard shortcuts for your brushes, for each of the tools in Paint Tool SAI. It's really handy, and I'm not sure if every program has this particular menu, but I will say that if you go with Wacom tablets, they actually have the ability where you can change the keyboard shortcuts in the drivers menu. There is an option in your tablet settings to actually choose all of your keyboard shortcuts for a single program. It is very easy and very good. Next we're going to talk about layers. A lot of digital artists use layers. I like using layers. This is actually one of the main advantages of digital art over traditional art. So here is how this works. So you can see here that we only have one layer on this side of the canvas. If you look on the left hand side, you can see that I've added 2 more layers to this canvas. Now, if I was to draw something on the second layer, which is the one in the middle, say if it was just a sketch, this is just going to be a very, very quick sketch, nothing too amazing. This is a very, very quick sketch of my character Jalul. Now, how I use layers is I do the sketch on the middle layer between this layer and that one. If you use digital art programs the same way I do and use it to draw out your ideas as well as just do finished illustrations, the way you start illustrations is you sketch it all out. So I've just sketched it on the middle layer. What I do after I've sketched it out is I turn the opacity down. How much, it doesn't really matter how much you turn it down. Then you go on to the layer above or add a new layer above if you already haven't, and select the layer on top. Now, before we go any further with the layers, this is actually a very, very good time to bring up the new view option. So if we go to the view drop down menu and click new, we can see that we've brought up another version of this drawing. Now it's exactly the same canvas and you can actually change the look of how it is. So how this works is that you can actually change how zoomed in it is. When inking, you are going to be focused on a particular area of the drawing, but you want to see all of it at the same time like you do with traditional art. So having this new view option is definitely going to improve artwork, and you can actually see the drawing as a whole and see what's working and what's not. Going back to the layer options, we go to the very, very top layer, and in this canvas we can zoom in very close to the eye and you can see that the new view is not being affected at all. Now I'm just going to line this drawing. I'm going to speed it up just so we're not sitting here all day. So the next step, is there anything wrong with the drawing? So the one thing that I'm thinking about with this drawing is that the eyes might be a little bit too far apart. So I want to check to see if they're actually in the right place, or at least if one of them's in the right place. How I'm going to do this is I'm going to use the lasso tool and draw around the eye. Now it is going to take out some of the line work depending on if you've actually done the eye on separate layers or not. Once you've made your selection, whether it's with the plane selection tool, the lasso tool, or the magic wand tool, now go to your keyboard and press Ctrl T. This will create a box that you can manipulate around that selection. So you can actually pull the eye down. If you click on the corner and press the Shift key, you can actually enlarge it and it remains proportional. Pressing Control and actually moving around these things actually allows you to go into freeform. So that means you can reshape the eyes or whatever you select in any way or shape that you want. This can be really, really useful, especially when working with perspective. The main thing that I do want to do is move it, and you can do that just by dragging it across and seeing how it looks. As you can see, I've only moved it a little bit just to see the difference. I'm going to press Ctrl Z and it's going to undo any action that I've made on the canvas. You can also do this by going to Edit and Undo, but like Ctrl Z for undo, Ctrl Y is redo. So if you like what you've done but you've undone it, you can actually redo it again with Ctrl Y. So what we can do now to see the line work without the sketch layer underneath, we can actually go onto the sketch layer that is with the opacity down, we can press the little I to hide the layer and unhide the layer whenever we want to. This is a really useful feature. It's on Photoshop, it's on Krita, it's on every digital art program that has this feature. So to actually make it easier for you guys to understand where my layers are, I'm going to name my layers. Not all artists actually name their layers because it's sometimes unnecessary because of the amount of layers that's in there, and they can actually see it through the little display shown here. To rename the layer, you just double click it and you can rename it. So you can see that I've actually saved the canvas at this point because I haven't saved it this entire time. My best advice, always save your canvas. Just save it. Just please save it. To actually add colours, we can go onto the sketch layer and press new layer. This will create a layer between the sketch and the line work layer, and you can use that for colour. I'm going to speed through the colours so you don't have to watch me just blab about colours. You can actually see from my colouring that I added a highlight layer. This is because this goes over the line work and it's actually really good, especially for eye highlights. People on my live streams ask me about the structure of my layers. Now, I use a thing called clipping masks. On Paint or SAI, they're actually called clipping groups, and this is how they work. To create a clipping group of the colour layer, I add a new layer and I select this option here. Now, whatever I draw on this layer will only be on the area of stuff coloured beneath. I can now do the shadows and the highlights on this clipping layer, and it will not go past the area that I've coloured. To show you an example, I'm going to colour a stripe all over my character. You can see that this stripe is not going anywhere past where I've coloured. This is important because it allows me to actually colour inside the lines. I'm just going to speed this part up. So right now you can see that I've splattered all purple everywhere in the places of shadow. I'm now going to splatter places in light yellow just for that highlight, and then show you what I do next. This is one of my very simple methods of colouring, and it's very effective, especially if it's only for the simple things. I could do a more in-depth tutorial on my digital art if you guys want it, but this is a very simple tutorial. You can actually have more than one clipping layer. Just add another layer and select clipping group. And just like the layer below it, it will clip to the colour layer. This way I'm going to add my subtle highlights. This is a method that I was actually taught in college. Now, I was actually taught to use black and white with values, and I really didn't like that effect. Using black can actually be a bad thing. Using black as a shading colour is not really recommended because it can just be too harsh. If that is what you're going for, then go all for it. But personally, I find it to be a bit too harsh. So now that we have both the highlights and the shadows roughly added in, I'm actually going to be using layer modes. This is also a thing in Photoshop and Krita and other programs as well. In Paint or SAI, they can be found here. And I have all of these layer modes. In Paint Tool SAI 2, I actually have more layer modes, but these are perfectly fine. The main ones you will need are Screen and Multiply. Now, the shadow colour, the purple splodges, are going to be set to Multiply. You can see right there that it's actually transformed that purple into a really good shading colour for all of the colours. Now the highlights, they're going to be set to Screen. And you can see that they've all highlighted all of the colours. Now if I was to select the purple colour while it's in its multiply stage, I would actually pick up the grey colour and not the purple, as you can see right here. You actually pick up a completely different colour. So it's always important to change your layers back to normal and then back to multiply. That way you can keep the colours consistent and the same. Just like what we did with the sketch, we are actually going to use opacity to test how bright the colours can be, or how subtle you want the shading and the highlights to be. I like a mix between a contrasting effect and a very subtle effect. I know that those are two contradicting things, but kind of like a middle ground, and this is the middle ground that I found. Depending on the way you want to do it, you can keep the clipping layers separate, or you can actually merge them into the bottom layer. Bearing in mind, if you do merge it into the bottom layer, you won't have the ability to keep it within the lines, but you will have more access to blending capabilities. This is a very good time to talk about brushes. Now, in the original Paint Tool SAI, you are given these brushes, also an airbrush as well, but these are the brushes that you have. Now you can actually see that I have a lot more brushes than just the originals. Now this is because adding brushes is a customized job. You can see the brushes in this section right here. Most of the brushes in this section that I have open are the basic brushes. Some of them are customized brushes. A custom brush I have right now on the menu is this brush called Hair 1. This brush has a texture like that, and you can actually see the texture if I zoom in, and you can see all the individual strands of hair. Now with Paint Tool SAI, brushes are incredibly customizable, but the reason why you see people uploading their brush settings to the internet with Paint Tool SAI is because the brushes don't save. They save to the interface, but they don't save as a file, so you have to input the settings every time you get a new version of Paint Tool SAI. If it was a single file, it would be so much easier, but I think that's an improvement for later on in the software's development. If you like the brush that I have, you can actually copy in all the settings that are listed right here. The main ones that I actually use a lot of are actually more so based on the original brushes. They're kind of variations that I've created throughout time, and I've had this program for over 6 years, so there's a lot of brushes that I have. And I use a custom brush called Oiled. Now I've called it Oiled, it's just basically the way oil paint layers, and I think it looks really pretty digitally, so that is actually the brush I use. You can actually copy in the settings if you want to do that. Just pause the video and screenshot the settings and just input them in. I'm okay with people using the brushes I use, and I will say that over time, if you use that brush often enough, you will end up customizing that brush to your certain preferences of the way you blend, the way you colour and everything else. With my Paint Tool SAI brushes, I'm completely okay to share the settings. To find out which ones are the default brushes, we can actually right click in an empty square and just see all of the selections. The select brush and the select eraser actually work exactly like the lasso tool, but it's actually a brush tool. You can actually select the area you want, by painting in that area. It's really a useful tool, especially if you have very tiny details that you need to select. I'm just going to speed up this part because it will be easier on me and you. For speed, I am just colour picking the actual colour of the hair and using it as the middle ground blending colour between the shadow and the highlights. However though, you can actually see that I have merged together my layers. Now this is the way I do it. You don't have to do it exactly the same way as me, but I use this because the blending system works a lot better with less layers. However, you can actually use more layers if you want to. This is just the way I tend to do it. So as you can see, I've actually finished off the colouring of this piece. Just to finish off, I'm going to smooth out a section using my oiled brush, just over here. Now at the end, you could actually see me adding in some strands of hair with the brush I called Hair 1. Now what I did was I created clipping masks and then also colour picked the colour that was already there and multiplied it on the layer. The colour picker can actually be found up here, as well as all these other tools. You have the selection, the lasso and the magic wand tool, as well as the move tool, zooming in and out, rotate and the hand tool. However, these all can be used with shortcuts, but as I said at the beginning of the tutorial, if you want to find out a shortcut or change a shortcut, you can go to the others menu and then click keyboard shortcuts. You can find out which shortcut is which, and also you can change each of the shortcuts. The most important shortcuts I love using in Paint Tool SAI and in any program really is the brush size. The brush size shortcuts are the square brackets on the keyboard, the left bracket for a smaller brush and the right bracket for a bigger brush. The other way that you can change the size of the brush is the sliders. The min size is actually how much of the brush is there when you put your pen down. However, with pen pressure, you can actually make the brush darker. This is a really light pressure and this is a really hard pressure. The last thing to note is that I actually merged my layers together. You don't have to do this, but I find it easier, especially to blend. It's also a quicker way to blend in my opinion, but you don't have to do that. Just experiment with the brushes and see which blend a lot better with your style. You will learn different techniques as you explore the program, and it's definitely a good idea to experiment. The last thing of this tutorial has another thing to do with clipping groups, and that's coloured line art. I am always asked about the way I do my coloured line art, and this is going to be how I do it. It's basically with a clipping group. So I select the line work layer and I add a new layer and use clipping group. I'm just going to select the colour brush. You can have colour blend in your coloured line work. I don't usually go for that, but you can actually have it a completely different colour. Or if you want to change all of the line work at once, you can just colour fill the entire line work layer. For example, if you were to have bright red line work, you could change the line work like that. Very easy, very quick and simple. But if you want coloured line work, you're going to have to colour the lines. You don't have to colour them very neatly, you just have to colour the lines in those colours. What I do in my coloured line work, say if I was to do the coloured line work of the hair, I would colour pick the hair in whatever section and I would drag it down or up depending on if I wanted light line work or darker line work for that area. You can also change the colour at any time just by dragging down the slider. It's very easy to do and I really like the way this is turning out. But say if I wanted lighter areas of the line work, well, that's easy. You can actually take the light colour and just put the light colour in the areas that you want. This adds some highlight to the line work and allows me to have variation in my line work. I tend to use blended line work very, very sparingly, so it just gives a very subtle but very nice effect. So this is a very simple way of me doing digital art. I really hope you found this helpful. If you did, you can comment down below saying what you thought was the most useful tip in this video. If you've made it all the way through the video, you can actually comment this down below in the comments section, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys!